The most damaging part of debt may not be the balance. The balance is visible. It sits on the statement and stares at you. But beneath that number may be something more dangerous. The habit of avoiding what you promised. Watch this. You can hide a letter in a drawer, but you cannot hide the obligation from your decisions. You can ignore the message, postpone the conversation, miss the date, and offer another vague assurance. You can even practice selective memory. I was going to call. Going to call is not communication. Intention without action is only a promise waiting to be broken again. Now take a deep breath, because this is not condemnation, this is diagnosis. Ask yourself an honest question. Do I merely want relief from pressure, or do I want restoration of authority? Relief says, make this uncomfortable feeling disappear. Authority says, I will face what is mine, establish order, and govern my conduct. Those are not the same thing. Write this principle down. A promise made becomes a responsibility to be governed. Governed, that is the word. Debt is not merely money outstanding, it is a commitment requiring management. The moment you promise to repay, deliver, return, or communicate, that promise enters the territory of your responsibility. Whatever you refuse to govern will eventually begin governing you. It will govern your sleep, your relationships, your choices, and even the stories you tell to protect yourself. Everybody say, I will face what I promised. Say it again. Avoidance will not manage my obligations. This restoration has an order. Truth must come before strategy, because you cannot plan around facts you refuse to face. Order must come before payment, because panic is expensive. Communication must come before credibility, because trust cannot grow in silence. And consistency must come before freedom, because one emotional decision does not create a disciplined life. So we are not beginning with a frightening total. We are beginning with government. We are bringing every promise back under truthful, deliberate, faithful management. But before you can govern an obligation properly, you must settle one critical issue. You may owe something, but you are not what you owe. You may owe something, but you are not what you owe. That distinction is not emotional decoration. It is essential to restoration. Write this down. A condition describes what must be addressed. An identity declares who you are. Debt is a condition. It is an unresolved commitment requiring an answer. But when you turn that condition into an identity, you stop saying, I made a poor decision, and begin saying, I am a failure. Now shame has changed the subject. The conversation is no longer about what must be repaired. It is about whether you are worthy of repair. Watch this carefully. Condemnation says you are hopeless. Accountability says this promise still requires your response. Condemnation attacks the person and leaves the obligation untouched. Accountability protects the person while confronting the conduct. That is why shame is so dangerous. Shame hides. Shame becomes defensive. Shame blames the economy, the family, the lender, the emergency, even the dog if the dog will sit still long enough. Shame spends energy explaining why nothing can be done. Responsibility asks a different question. Not what is wrong with me. Ask, what must I now govern? That question restores movement. Perhaps you calculated poorly. Perhaps pressure arrived faster than your preparation. Perhaps you tried to help someone with resources you did not truly possess. Perhaps you promised more than your income could sustain. Name it accurately. Do not decorate it, but do not dramatize it either. I missed the payment is truth. My life is ruined forever. Is not an accounting statement. That is fear attempting to become a prophet. Take a deep breath. You do not need to protect your dignity with denial. Your dignity is demonstrated by your willingness to face the truth. Everybody say, I will not deny the obligation. Now say, I will not become the obligation. Put the two together. I will not deny the obligation, and I will not become the obligation. That confession gives you both sides of restoration. Enough accountability to repair what is unresolved, and enough dignity to believe repair is possible. No excuses, no self-hatred. Truth with responsibility. And once shame no longer controls the conversation, the next enemy becomes visible. Disorder survives wherever obligations remain hidden. Disorder survives wherever obligations remain hidden, and hiding creates a strange kind of peace. You do not open the message, so for 5 minutes the number disappears. You avoid the conversation, so for one evening the pressure becomes quiet. But quiet is not order. Silence is not settlement. What you remove from your sight is still directing your life. Watch the cycle. Fear produces delay. Delay reduces your options. Fewer options increase the pressure. Increased pressure produces more fear. Then you say, I cannot look at it now, it is too stressful. Of course it is stressful, you have been feeding it with delay. Debt is also larger than the formal balance. It includes the household commitment you postponed without discussion. It includes the money borrowed from a friend and never mentioned again. It includes the payment date you promised, missed, and replaced with silence. It includes the relational expectation created when somebody trusted your word. Now imagine a person who knows a little about everything but the truth about nothing. They know one card is somewhere around this amount. They remember another payment is probably due soon. They owe a relative, but nobody has discussed it lately, so they pretend that means it vanished. They are carrying fragments, not information. And fragments cannot be governed. So what do? They pay whoever speaks the loudest. They promise money before checking whether it exists. They move pressure from one place to another and call that progress. Then they refuse the difficult conversation because they are waiting for things to improve. Take a deep breath. An unopened notice has never held a meeting with itself and decided to solve its own problem. Paper is patient. It will wait for you. Write this down. Secrecy is not protection. Secrecy is the surrender of control. What remains unnamed cannot be ordered. Everybody say unnamed cannot be ordered. And what remains unordered will eventually command attention. It will choose the day, the hour, and the level of urgency. That is what happens when you refuse to govern. The neglected obligation begins setting the agenda. But the moment you name it, locate it, and bring it into the light, it stops being a mysterious threat and becomes a defined responsibility. Therefore, the first act of restored financial authority is not payment. It is complete disclosure. Complete disclosure. That means you gather the scattered pieces and bring them into one visible, reviewable system. This is not punishment. This is government. A leader cannot manage what has not been identified. So take out the statements. Open the messages. Find the agreements. Record the due dates, recurring commitments, personal loans, and promises you made in conversation. Yes, even the promise you made so casually that you hoped the other person had forgotten it. They may have forgotten the date, but trust remembers the disappointment. For every obligation, record the facts. What is the present amount or required commitment? What action is expected? What are the terms? What is the deadline? What may happen if you delay? Who is involved? What is its current status? Do not write, I owe them something. Something is not a number. Soon is not a date. I will handle it is not a plan. Now create categories. Put essential household responsibilities together. List formal debts separately. Identify tax or legal obligations where applicable. Include work-related commitments. Then list money owed to relatives, friends, partners, or anyone who trusted your word without giving you a printed statement. Watch this. If an item is disputed, write disputed. If the amount is uncertain, write uncertain. If information is missing, write incomplete. Honest uncertainty is better than a comforting invention. The purpose is not to look organized. The purpose is to become organized and include every promise you have already communicated. If you promised an amount you now know you cannot pay, record it. If you gave a date you cannot meet, record it. The broken forecast is now part of the situation. Then review the whole inventory without making payment decisions yet. Do not panic and send money randomly because one line frightened you. Truth comes before reaction. First, see the entire field. Where terms, rights, or consequences are unclear, seek qualified financial or legal guidance. Guessing is not courage. Asking for competent help is responsible management. Everybody say, I will face the whole picture. When everything is visible, fear loses some of its mystery. You no longer have 10 shadows chasing you. You have defined responsibilities in front of you. Concealment has ended. Authority has begun. But do not celebrate too early. A complete list is not yet a plan. Truth must now be converted into order. Truth must now be converted into order. But before you start sending money in every direction, stop. A large total can make an intelligent person behave irrationally. Panic sees a number and starts making random payments, dramatic promises, and emotional decisions. That is activity, but activity is not management. For every item on your inventory, ask 4 questions. Write them down. First, what is required? Second, what is at risk? Third, what is realistically possible? Fourth, what behavior produced or prolonged this obligation? Do not skip the 4th question. The balance tells you how much pressure exists. The behavior tells you why the pressure may return. Watch this. One obligation may represent immediate cash pressure. Another may reveal a structural problem spending that repeatedly exceeds capacity, commitments that change every week, or promises made before the numbers are calculated. If you solve the immediate shortage but preserve the structure, congratulations. You have repaired the roof while leaving the storm inside the house. Now identify what each obligation touches. Is an essential household need involved? Are there serious consequences that require prompt attention? Is a relationship being damaged? Is the situation worsening while you delay? There is no universal ranking that can replace careful judgment, complete facts, and qualified guidance where necessary. Diagnosis must come before sequence. Then separate inability from unwillingness. They may look alike from a distance, but they demand different responses. Inability says, my present capacity cannot sustain the original commitment. That requires honest negotiation, adjustment, and a realistic structure. Unwillingness says, I could change my priorities, but I refuse. That requires a correction of character. Do not get quiet now. Look across the entire list for repeated patterns. Convenience borrowing, rescuing other people while neglecting your own responsibilities, maintaining an image you cannot afford, spending to soothe emotion, treating predictable expenses as though they arrive from another planet. Patterns are expensive because they reproduce. Now write 1 sentence. The governing problem beneath my balances is, finish it honestly, not poetically, not defensively, precisely. When the problem has a name, the debt stops looking like one shapeless monster. It becomes a set of defined conditions requiring different responses. One needs communication. One needs restraint. One needs restructuring. One needs repayment. One needs a change in behavior. And once the problem is correctly diagnosed, you can establish an order of response instead of obeying whichever pressure shouts the loudest. Order means assigning resources according to responsibility, consequence, and realistic capacity. Not fear, not embarrassment, not convenience. If the loudest voice always receives the first response, then noise, not principle, is governing your money. Write this down. Urgency must be examined, not merely obeyed. Begin with the responsibilities that protect basic household stability and your ability to keep functioning and earning. Food, shelter, necessary utilities, transportation for essential duties, and the responsibilities of those who depend on you must be seen clearly. You do not prove integrity by creating one emergency to calm another. Next, identify obligations carrying imminent or serious consequences. These require prompt attention, clarification, and, where appropriate, qualified professional guidance. Ignoring them does not make you brave. It makes the calendar your decision maker. Then stop creating new damage. Suspend avoidable commitments. Stop financing appearances while existing promises are neglected. You cannot be dressed like success and managed by confusion. The people admiring the outside are not coming home to organize the inside. Watch this carefully. Preserve required commitments across your obligations as far as your verified capacity allows, then direct available extra capacity toward the priority you have deliberately chosen. The priority should not change every time a new message arrives. It should change when the facts justify a change. And do not forget relational debt. A small loan from a friend may not be the largest figure on your page, but months of silence may be producing the greatest damage to trust. The number may be small, the meaning may be large. Order must consider both financial consequence and relational responsibility. Now build a written sequence. Name your first priority. Write why it is first. State the action required. State what resources are available. Then set the date when you will review the decision. Do the same for the next responsibility and the next. Everybody say, my money will follow order. If income changes, a serious consequence becomes clearer, or an agreement is revised, update the sequence. That is wise adjustment. But changing direction because you feel guilty today, frightened tomorrow, and optimistic on Friday is not flexibility. That is emotional traffic. A written order gives you a defensible path. You no longer ask, who is pressuring me now? You ask, what responsibility requires the next governed action? But an ordered plan remains incomplete while the people affected are left in darkness. The next responsibility is honest communication. Honest communication is part of repayment. Silence may feel harmless because no words are being spoken, but silence still sends a message. It forces the other person to interpret your intentions without reliable information. They begin asking, are they avoiding me? Did they forget? Was their word ever serious? Distrust grows in the space where truth should have been. Now understand the difference between an excuse and an explanation. An excuse uses circumstances to escape responsibility. An explanation supplies the facts so responsible action can follow. The purpose of speaking is not to prove that life has been difficult. The purpose is to make the next step clear. Write down this 4-part message. First, acknowledge the obligation. Second, state the present reality without drama. Third, propose the action you can actually take. Fourth, name the date of your next update. For example, do not say, do not worry, I am going to take care of everything very soon. That sentence has no amount, no action, and no date. Very soon is where broken promises go on vacation. Say instead, I acknowledge what I owe. I cannot meet the original date. According to my present plan, I can take this action on this date. I will update you again by this specific day. That is measurable, that can be remembered, that can be tested. But watch this. Never promise the amount before checking your written plan. Never invent a deadline because the conversation feels uncomfortable. A promise made to escape pressure will return carrying more pressure. If a revised arrangement is discussed, document it. Confirm the amount, action, timing, and what each party understands. Memory becomes very creative when disappointment enters the room. And what if your proposal is refused? You still tell the truth. You remain respectful. You keep careful records. You take the next responsible step and seek appropriate professional help when the situation requires it. Integrity does not mean you control another person's response. It means you govern your own. Now, identify the 3 conversations you have been avoiding most. Write the names. No initials to protect yourself from your own notebook. Decide when each conversation will begin. Everybody say, I will not use silence as a strategy. When you communicate honestly, credibility can begin returning before the final balance reaches 0. Honesty opens the door, but only a sustainable repayment structure can keep this new promise from becoming another broken one. A sustainable repayment structure begins with facts, not enthusiasm. Do not build the plan around the income you hope will arrive, the bonus nobody promised, or the miracle refund wandering through the postal system. Begin with verified available income. Then identify essential outflow. Government starts with what is true. Now determine what can be committed consistently without pretending that food, shelter, transportation, and necessary responsibilities have disappeared. A plan that works only when nothing goes wrong is not a plan. It is a wish wearing a necktie. Write this down. Credibility requires commitments that match capacity. Every promised payment must have 3 things: a date, a source, and a method. What date will it be made? Which income or allocation will provide it? How will it be delivered? If you cannot answer those questions, you do not yet have a payment plan. You have a good intention. Create one simple calendar. Put every required payment on it. Mark the present priority. Schedule the difficult communications before their update dates arrive. Add regular review points. The calendar should tell you what happens next without requiring a fresh emotional debate every morning. Then examine non-essential outflow. What is competing directly with the promises you say you want to honor? Reduce it. Suspend it. Make the sacrifice visible and purposeful. Do not merely say, I am cutting back. Name what is changing and redirect those resources according to the written order. But watch this. Leave a reasonable margin for ordinary disruptions. One repair, one schedule change, or one necessary expense should not immediately destroy everything. Margin is not laziness. Margin is foresight. Use reminders, separate allocations, and automatic processes where they are appropriate. But do not automate your attention away. A system can move money. It cannot supply judgment. You must still review, confirm, and adjust. Now test the plan against a difficult month. If income is lower or an ordinary disruption appears, which promise fails first? If the answer exposes an unsupported commitment, revise it before communicating it. Better an honest plan today than an impressive apology next month. Everybody say, I will promise from capacity. Repayment is not one emotional event. It is repeated evidence that government has changed. The money is assigned, the dates are visible, the priorities are protected, and the promises are realistic. The plan may look excellent on paper, but credibility returns only when disciplined action continues after the emotion of this message fades. One modest promise kept repeatedly is stronger than one heroic promise announced publicly and broken privately. Credibility is not rebuilt through volume. It is rebuilt through evidence. Every completed action produces evidence. First, it proves something to you. I can govern my conduct. Then it proves something to your household. This plan is more than another emotional speech. Eventually, it speaks to the person whose trust was damaged. The behavior has changed. Notice the order. Evidence before confidence. Consistency before credibility. Set one brief weekly review. Look at the current balances. Check the dates coming next. Mark the actions completed. Identify any new risk. Then ask, who must hear from me before the next deadline? This review is not a ceremony. It is maintenance. Small disorder discovered early is easier to govern than hidden disorder discovered late. Now suppose you miss a commitment. Do not wait for the other person to find it. A missed payment is one problem. Making them investigate your silence creates another. Use this repair sequence. Admit the miss. Explain the fact that changed without turning it into an excuse. Take the next action genuinely available. Then give a revised date for your next update. Say, I missed what I committed to do. This is what changed. This is what I can do now. I will update you again on this date. Clear, responsible, governed. Watch this. A setback is not automatically a return to the old life. A setback becomes dangerous when you hide it, defend it, or let one miss cancel the entire discipline. You stumbled, you did not receive permission to move into the ditch and decorate it. Track every kept commitment visibly. Record the payment made, the message sent, the date honored, and the balance changed. Measure progress in two directions. Obligations are declining and reliability is increasing. But do not demand immediate applause. Trust may recover more slowly than the numbers. People who experience repeated disappointment may need repeated evidence. Your responsibility is not to force them to feel safe on your schedule. Your responsibility is to remain truthful on yours. Everybody say, I will build a record, not make a performance. Restoration is not one dramatic apology. It is a sustained history of governed behavior. Consistent repayment repairs yesterday's promises. Wisdom must now prevent tomorrow's pressure from recreating the same pattern. Consistent repayment repairs yesterday's promises. But wisdom asks another question. What door did this pattern use to enter? Return to your diagnosis. Before the obligation appeared, was there impulse? Emerge. Convenience. Fear. Generosity without boundaries. Refusal to plan. Debt often arrives, carrying a receipt from an earlier behavior. Now be fair and truthful. Some obligations grow from hardship that was not chosen. Life can change, income can be disrupted, and necessary pressures can exceed preparation. Do not manufacture shame for circumstances beyond your control. But do not use unavoidable hardship to protect avoidable repetition. You may not control everything that happens. You are still responsible for what you repeatedly permit. Write a personal borrowing rule. Before accepting any new obligation, require 4 answers. What is its purpose? What will it truly require? Does the repayment fit verified capacity? Have I allowed enough time to think before committing? If one answer is unclear, the decision is not ready. And establish boundaries around rescuing other people. Generosity is not responsible when it spends resources already assigned to your household or existing promises. You cannot save someone from their emergency by quietly creating one in your own home. Watch emotional spending. When pressure, disappointment, celebration, or comparison creates an urge to spend, pause. Write the reason for the purchase. Wait before acting. If necessary, discuss it with someone who has permission to ask you uncomfortable questions. Feelings are real, but they are terrible accountants. Prepare for recurring expenses before they become emergencies. If something returns predictably, give it a place in the plan. A known expense wearing a different month is not a surprise. Now, define the lifestyle required during restoration. What must be reduced? What must be suspended? What conditions must be met before optional spending expands again? Do not let one good month declare a national holiday. Complete this sentence in writing. The behavior I must stop financing is, do not write the name of another person. This is your audit. Everybody say, I will close the door. Paying old balances while preserving old habits is not restoration, it is intermission. But when you change the rules, boundaries, preparation, and behavior, you begin dismantling the machinery that reproduced disorder. And when the cycle is broken, financial freedom can finally be defined as more than reaching a zero balance. Financial freedom is not merely the disappearance of a balance. A zero can remove pressure, but only government can preserve freedom. Relief and dominion are different. Relief says, the crisis has passed. Dominion says, the crisis no longer directs my conduct. Relief changes the moment. Dominion changes the manager. Look at the journey. Truthful inventory restored your sight. You stopped hiding and saw the whole picture. Ordered response restored priority. You stopped paying according to noise and began acting according to responsibility. Honest communication began restoring relationships. Consistency began restoring credibility. That means you can begin acting freely before every balance is gone. Why? Because avoidance is no longer making the decisions. Fear is no longer setting the calendar. Shame is no longer writing the message. The obligation may still exist, but it is now under management. Watch for the practical signs. Before you make a promise, you check your capacity. When you give a date, you record it. When a difficult message arrives, you answer it. When money enters your hands, it follows declared priorities instead of the mood of the moment. That is restored government. Everybody repeat the sequence. Face it, order it, communicate it, repair it. Again, face it, order it, communicate it, repair it. Now write down 4 laws. First, hidden obligations gain power. Second, named obligations can be governed. Third, credible promises must match capacity. Fourth, consistent repair rebuilds authority. Those laws apply while the balance is large, while it is shrinking, and after it is gone. Because freedom is not proven only by what you have paid. Freedom is revealed by what now governs you. Do not become sentimental about the past. You cannot deny the missed dates, the poor decisions, the avoidable silence, or the trust that was damaged. But the past does not have to remain the operating system of your future. History may explain your present position. It does not have to command your next action. Take a deep breath. You are not waiting for freedom to arrive one day. You are practicing freedom every time truth replaces hiding, order replaces panic, and disciplined action replaces excuses. The principle is clear. Now the final movement must convert that principle into an immediate assignment with dates, evidence, and accountability. Now, conviction must become conduct. Everybody say, I will not use shame as a hiding place, and I will not use hope as a substitute for a plan. Again, I will not hide, and I will not merely hope. I will govern. Here is your restoration assignment. During the first 24 hours, gather every known obligation. Bring together the statements, agreements, messages, deadlines, recurring commitments, informal loans, and unresolved promises. Do not organize selectively. If it carries your name, your responsibility, or your word, bring it into the light. During the next 24 hours, complete the truthful inventory. Record what is owed, what is required, who is involved, what date applies, and what consequence may follow. Mark every unknown that requires clarification. Do not fill an empty space with a comforting guess. Write unknown, then find the truth. During the following 24 hours, establish your order of response. Name the priorities, explain why they are priorities, and identify the next governed action. Then begin the conversations you have avoided most. A plan hidden in your notebook cannot repair trust. Before those 72 hours are complete, create one written repayment calendar. Name one accountable person who has permission to ask whether you followed it. Schedule one weekly review and keep that appointment for the next 30 days. Preserve the evidence. Keep the messages sent. Record the agreements clarified. Track the payments made. Note the spending changes implemented. Mark the promises kept. You are building proof that your government has changed. And when an obligation involves complex legal, tax, housing, or other serious consequences, seek qualified assistance promptly. Courage does not require ignorance. Responsible people ask for competent help. Now stand in the principle. Truth without condemnation. Responsibility without excuses. Order without panic. Communication without deception. Consistency without retreat. Everybody say, I will face it. I will order it. I will communicate it. I will repair it. Your balance may not disappear tonight, but avoidance can end tonight. Your past may not be rewritten tonight, but your next action can be governed tonight. That is where freedom begins. Do not leave as a hearer impressed by a principle. Leave as a governor of every promise you have made.